Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the Budget Committee meeting for 2024 to order, please. We have regrets from Councillor Longo. At this time, I'd be looking for any declarations of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. We have no consent items and no confidential consent items. So we'll go right into our discussion items, items 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, and confidential consent item 6.1. But prior to doing that, we are going to have some introductory opening comments from our Deputy Treasurer and Director of Finance, Jonathan Vanderheyden. Jonathan, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair O'Meara, and good morning to the members of the Budget Committee, and welcome to our September 6th Budget Committee meeting. Before we dive into today's agenda items and the presentations, I thought I'd give a quick recap of our budget process and explain the purpose for today's meeting. So Jessica, if you don't mind to pull up that budget approval process document for us for a second. It's just the PDF one. It should be there. Okay, we'll wing it as it is. So if you think back to the, there it is. It's the first PDF one at the top, budget approval. That's the one. It's a very fancy flow chart. All right. So this is our fancy flow chart for our budget process this year. And as you'll recall, this is a little bit different this year with the changes in legislation, but also to incorporate some more public consultation in our budget process based on the feedback we had from last year's budget debrief process. So as you can see for September 6th, the purpose of today's meeting is to receive staff reports that may have a budget impact. So more specifically, we have 4 staff reports for you to consider today that could have an impact on the town's service levels or services that we provide to residents. And as with most changes to services or service levels, there is a budget impact that needs to be considered. For each of the 4 topics today, staff are looking to the committee for input and direction on these items, specifically on their inclusion in the 2024 budget process, so they can be prioritized along with other known budget pressures. The decisions made by Budget Committee are not binding on the inclusion of these items in the budget. Rather, they will direct staff to incorporate them into the budget process so the Budget Committee can see the financial impact of the changes. Each staff report today will have an accompanying presentation, after which staff will be available for any questions on the report or on the presentation. And before I conclude these short introductory remarks, I also wanted to look ahead to our next 2 Budget Committee meetings as well. So on September 19th, we have the opportunity to hear back from the budget subcommittees on their public consultations. And then on October 17th and 19th, we'll have the presentation of the draft budget to Budget Committee based on the Mayor's direction. And accompanying that will be the overview presentation, the commissioner presentations, and it will also be an opportunity for staff to report back on any budget information requests that we may receive. So that's all I had for you, Chair O'Meara, and I'll pass it back to you to call the first presentation.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Appreciate that. It's a great little flow chart to let everybody know sort of how we're going to navigate the waters ahead of us. So next we'll ask Commissioner Garb to come and to give us a presentation on item 5.1, the Downtown Cultural Hub update and future directions.
Thank you, Chair O'Meara and members of the committee. Apparently, Commissioner Bell thought Paris was a better destination than Oakville, so I'm doing my best with a host of thousands to try to represent her as well as me as project lead. I'm here to present an update and recommendations for moving forward with the Downtown Cultural Hub, and specifically the capital budget inclusion for the Downtown Cultural Hub. By way of background, this slide articulates the objectives that bring life to the vision to the downtown cultural hub. And these were confirmed last year by council in September. Similarly, last September, council approved the dispersed model of the downtown cultural hub facilities versus a centralized model on the Centennial Square site. I will walk through our recommendations for each of the facilities in the next few slides, and that's articulated in the staff report. As a refresher, there are 3 sites for the facilities: the Centennial Square, the former fire hall site, as well as the former post office site, just to get your orientation straight. Firstly, the public libraries are essential infrastructure to building and sustaining healthy communities. They provide a multitude of services, from study, work, and collaborative spaces to the hands-on interactive acquisition of new skills to reader and literacy programs and services. Libraries create spaces and opportunities to gather in person and online, creating stronger social cohesion in the areas they serve. Oakville Public Library's Central Branch has served as its flagship for over 60 years. However, the current building has come to the end of its useful life and requires replacement. The post office site provides a prime opportunity to create an updated flagship library that will take the town of Oakville and its residents into the next 60 years. Libraries are for knowledge, culture, health, democracy, reconciliation, and belonging. And the proposed investment in a new central library branch on the site will allow OPL to continue to provide key services and assistance to all residents while supporting the Oakville downtown and connecting out to all the wards and neighborhoods. This is an aggressive timeline that sees substantial completion in 2028, with the groundbreaking in 2025. I'll highlight that public consultation will be throughout the process related to the programming and how that library will serve the public. Oakville galleries are part of the downtown cultural hub, an important part. And we're exploring options for the new gallery, and some of the options being considered are at the existing fire hall site, and those options include a standalone facility or included as part of a larger development proposal. The timeline for council consideration would be the spring of 2024. A co-location has been considered in the past. However, delivering a like-for-like library would be impacted, and the functioning would be reduced to a branch-style service as opposed to a flagship. And it would also slow down the delivery timelines that I mentioned before, with the inclusion for, as happens with all co-located facilities. There's also a desire to include alternate streams of income in a facility, such as a restaurant by both the library and the gallery, which would create some conflicts as well. The work of the previous study on the Performing Arts Center will provide some helpful info, but we'll need to refresh the study post-COVID and considering new directions in the performing arts. The feasibility study is part of the work that is being proposed through the recommended budget, and will include a conceptual plan for the site and how a new theater will fit on there and be built where the Centennial Pool is. But council will see these directions as the feasibility study and feasibility work is completed. The new direction that we want to bring to council's attention is the possibility of additional residential and potentially a hotel on the Centennial Square site. This additional residential would bring needed vitality and vibrancy to the area, as well as additional funding source as we look at a financial plan for the area and how to complete the works, the desired works in Downtown Cultural Hub with the greatest opportunity for other sources of revenue as well. The financial request is split into two aspects of the $6 million. 4.2 for specifically the initial work on the detailed design for Central Library on the post office site, and the balance being 1.8 million for the feasibility studies for the Performing Arts Center, the feasibility studies for the waterfront park and parking opportunities on the Centennial Square, the evaluation of potential for a boutique hotel and additional residential on Centennial Square, as well as opportunities to accommodate Oakville galleries within the Downtown Cultural Hub, and lastly, the analysis of downtown parking options and the rationalization of the parking locations. With that, Mr. Chair, our recommendations are stated in the staff report, and I'd be pleased to answer questions. The team is here as well if you have more specific questions for any one of the facilities.
Thank you very much. I guess I'd ask the committee, we do have a delegation. Would you want to ask questions now or hear from the delegate first? What say you? Delegate? Delegate? Okay, perfect. So, Councillor Chisholm, I see your hand. If you can just hold off, we're just going to hear from our one delegation here, and then we can have a great discussion. We have Seamus Keeley, the Executive Director of the Oakville Galleries, is here to delegate. Mr. Keeley, if you'd like to come up to the dais here, the microphone, it is all yours. We look forward to your information.
Do I need to turn it on?
Should be on for you. Just make sure you speak into it so we can hear you clearly.
Good. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, team, town staff, and the public. Could we possibly have my presentation put up on the screen, please? Thank you. It should be the one that you had on earlier, a little sneak preview. While that's being set up, I just want to express gratitude for the opportunity to speak today. I've had conversations in the town with people, our guests that come into the galleries and the public, as well as some councillors, with the mayor as well. Of course, with our board. Our board is a diverse board, people living throughout different parts of Oakville, representing different communities. And we've agreed a vision for Oakville Galleries, which I want to speak to today in the context of this new museum. If we have the next slide, please. So the current Oakville Galleries, as I'm sure all of you visited, is located in Garlick Gardens. It's a beautiful place, beautiful location. It's a bit small for what we want to do. We are one of the more ambitious contemporary art spaces in Canada. That means we show international artists, we show Canadian artists. We also host a lot of public programming, education programs. I'm sure many of you had your kids at our facilities, but we do need a new facility. Next slide, please. So we are looking at a museum for contemporary art. There's a few key objectives here, key insights. This is a world-class facility that will enhance the quality of life in Oakville. It's a landmark museum. It's something that's going to attract people of all ages, also visitors into the downtown area. It's a people-focused museum. That means we are accessible. One of the key aspects of our vision is a vision of hospitality. We have a high-caliber program that's recognized across the nation and, of course, internationally. And in looking at building the new museum, we want to build a green museum, but one that fosters a healthy environment, also in terms of our education programs, balancing that with new ideas for the future. And of course, it's a financially viable model and a socioeconomic driver. And I want to speak to that a little bit in this presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So you all know the objectives because you've been a part of the process in writing them. I don't need to rehash them. But effectively, what we wish to do will meet all of these objectives. We want to build a museum that's going to contribute to an economically vibrant downtown, a cultural-focused downtown, to provide facilities for future needs, to enhance the downtown's green space, and to develop financially sustainable solutions, as I've gone over. Have the next slide, please. There's a concept that was circulated with all the information for this meeting. I hope some of you have had time to look at it. We have been speaking with town staff about the possibility of the fire hall as a location, which we're very excited by. As you probably all know, as I've been informed, I've been here since April, there have been different permutations for a new museum where it could possibly go. The library space being shared with the Oakville Galleries in the post office, for example, or high school, which is just behind where I live. That'd be very handy for me, and so on. And the fire hall for us is a very exciting possibility. There is some work that needs to be done. We wouldn't want to tear down the building. We'd like to add to it. We'd like to build out to it. And we've spoken with architects about that distinctly. Could we go to the next slide, please? I wish I could press a button. Is there a button I can press? No? That's okay. So just to give you a quick background, in Ireland in 2008, I arrived to direct the Model Art Center, which was built in this old school. And the job was to redevelop it into a larger facility. But of course, this is exactly when the financial crisis happened. If we can have the next slide, please. The result was this. You can see the first section on the right is the old school. In the middle was the initial extension. And then we built this third extension, which had wonderful facilities, including a cinema, new studios, new expanded gallery spaces. And we did it in a year and a half. Okay, so this was during the financial crisis in Ireland. It was a very difficult time to raise money. I've led this project with council, with funding across Europe, of course, mainly in Ireland and across border funding. But we did it, and it was part of a bigger plan for a district, a cultural district in Sligo, where it's located in the west coast of Ireland. We had to make some changes due to the financial constraints, but we did it. If we go to the next slide, please. And you can see the facility was beautiful. It wasn't just a space to hang pictures. We're not talking about a picture gallery. We're talking about a place for people to come together, to learn about art and culture, and to experience a sense of belonging. If we can go to the next slide, please. Since then, I was directing the Kunstverein, Salzburger Kunstverein in Austria, getting to understand the role of a museum in a civic center. I could speak about that in great detail, but I'm conscious of time. Go to the next slide, please. I've seen many facilities and how they've worked across Europe, North America, and globally, how a museum functions in the middle of the city, how it builds a city and a city center. Can we go to the next slide, please? And that's something that we would like to do. We think about, how a museum embraces nature and embraces the community. The architecture itself should have this relationship with the town and bring people into the program. Next slide. And so here, in short, I'll finish on this slide and let Bill Nankivell come on next, who's online. This is the designs we've come up with for the fire hall site to have a new museum. Of course, we'd be looking at a new identity for the organization. The program will be more ambitious. What we can offer to the community will be more ambitious in terms of our education program. Our summer camps this summer were completely sold out. We could have doubled or tripled the kids attending those summer camps. And that's something we need to think about with this new facility. So I hope I've captured a little bit of our vision for the new museum, and I'll turn it over to Bill Nankivell, who I believe is online. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Keeley. I'm not sure, Eddie, if you're able to let Bill come on. Is that okay?
Thank you.
She's on. What is that? Can we pause the time at all, Mickey, or no?
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. If you can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Wonderful. Bill Nankivell, I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Oakville Galleries. Also, by way of background, I'm an architect. I've been with a practice for a very long time, involved in many cultural and institutional facilities across Canada and even in Oakville. But I'm here just to add a few words to Seamus and really speak to what is in front of Council today. Many of you will know we've had a very long history of trying to find an appropriate home for the galleries. Something that is worthy of the town, of the community, that speaks to the importance of contemporary art in our society, reflects the diversity of voices that we have amongst us. We have been gone through studies at the old high school site. We had been understood back in 2015 that the Oakville Galleries would be possibly co-located with the library on the post office site. 8 years later, we're actually still, interested in that. It's been a long time. And what we need is certainty about a location we're going to go to. The board and the community are going to embark on an ambitious fundraising campaign. We're going to do the hard work. We're going to pull our weight. But we can't do that until we know where that is going to be. And we need your partnership as the town, as the council, as the leadership to find a solution to that. We have the concerns that we would like to raise. The concept of being part of a mixed-use development, we believe, just puts the timeline years down the road. You would need to find a developer who could see financially how this model would work. You would need to be able to prove even that a residential development of that scale is going to go on what timeline, and in the uncertainties about the economy. And, we look around at other abandoned residential projects, even right down in the downtown core, but throughout Oakville. So we're very concerned that is one of the options being looked at. We're very excited about the possibility of a standalone museum on that fire hall site. But given that decision seems to yet to be made down the future, we just wanted to kind of raise your attention. And we also want everybody on council to know that we were not opposed to being co-located with the library. In fact, over the last year, I think about 16 months since we had meetings about that with various members of the town, we are actually quite excited about that opportunity. And one of the things that we would ask is a consideration in these feasibilities that are about to be undertaken include another look at, could the galleries be co-located on that site with the library? We're not aware that the study has been done definitively that shows that there's not an architectural solution, that there wouldn't in fact be benefits for both institutions to be on that site together. We would ask that still be considered. If that proves to not work, we're very excited about the fire hall site, and we need a partnership. We probably need an innovative partnership with the town to make that work, and we hope that we would have your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bill, for speaking with us and joining us today. Are there any questions of the delegation right now from the committee members? Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Chair. I think I heard you say, Bill, that you're not opposed to be co-located. Did I hear that correctly, or did I hear that incorrectly?
No, that is correct. We had actually been under the impression that was going to be a preferred option up until just recently, and as this report was developed and coming to town.
So, are you speaking on behalf of your board that is the feeling currently?
Yeah. Yes, I am speaking on behalf of the board of directors.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, and with respect to, I know you're looking at co-partnership or something in that nature. Was there any consideration with Queen Elizabeth Cultural Center as coming together as a co-op with the town? And it seems there's about 150,000 square feet of facility there. Is there any indication or design of looking at that as a possible site?
So I can answer that, and Bill might want to jump into. I think that Oakville Galleries as a future museum is very excited about being part of the downtown cultural hub. We see this as the key objective in terms of site and location. I think that there's been a lot of research and work and studies done into a very exciting downtown cultural hub that's underway, and this would make the most sense in terms of a location. Bill, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I would support what Seamus said. The board sees the galleries as part of the downtown cultural hub, and that would be our preferred.
So I'm assuming there was never any inroads or discussion with respect to QEPCC as a alternative site.
There have not been any discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adams?
Thanks very much. I wondered if one of the delegates could speak to the magnitude of dollars that they think they can bring to the table. Because one of the issues with the whichever site it is that's chosen in whichever format that's chosen, there's a question about to what extent can the galleries actually support a facility financially, in terms of moving from where they are now. I know from my years being on the gallery board, financial stability was always a problem, and the ability to do fundraising is challenging. And so if you're looking at trying to get a standalone fire hall building, that's one thing. If there was financial support as part of a larger deal, what might that look like?
I can begin to answer that, Bill, and then I'll let you come in at the end. So we've done research on various forms of funding in Canada, both on the provincial level and the federal level for cultural facilities, the Canada Cultural Space Fund, the federal Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund. I could list off many different funding opportunities that we've researched. We also will be engaging in a fundraising campaign, but that cannot begin until we have a site established. So for us to present a vision to the public and to potential funders, whether they are public or private, does require that we have an actual site. So we're waiting on the decision, the confirmation of the site to begin our fundraising campaign. But I've led this kind of a fundraising campaign before in Ireland. Again, during the financial crisis, it isn't easy, but it's not insurmountable. And we have a very strong and active fundraising committee on the board. We're well connected into Oakville and beyond. We've been doing our research, as I mentioned. So, this is something we would see happening from different funding streams. It's not one or two, but from a number of them. Once the facility is built, it'll be the same. This is also part and parcel of a financial strategy. There'll be different income streams for the facility. With the restaurant, there'll be a significant income stream. With different workshop spaces, there'll be different income streams. We have already established funding from the Canada Council, from the Ontario Council, and of course from the town of Oakville, which we're very grateful for. But also I pursue international relationships, international partnerships. When we produce big exhibitions, they're done in partnership with other organizations. They're done with funding from across the world. So, it's a mixed beast, so to speak, but something that is very exciting and thrilling. This is an overview of how that would be done. Bill, did you want to add to that?
No, I don't really have anything to add to that, Councillor, except that it is a classic chicken and egg situation. We need some certainty about the location and the nature of the project. We need a feasibility study to do some initial capital planning on it. And then we can turn our minds to focus on how to raise those funds, both from programs and grants, as well as from kind of classic philanthropy and fundraising within the community, but within the arts community across the country. This could be, we really envision this as being one of Canada's leading contemporary art museums.
Yeah, and I think as Bill is saying, the crucial element here is our timeline. We want to start this now.
Thank you so much. Are you good, Councillor Adams? Councillor Duddick, you're next.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased Councillor Adams raised that issue, because that was, I guess, my focus was, and I was pleased to see in your presentation that you indicated you want to develop a financially sustainable solution for the future. I think that's crucial. I guess my one question would be to gain a better understanding, what is the current financial support you receive from the town? Like, is it on an operational basis? I know you use the Gairloch Gardens. Does the gallery pay rent for that? And if so, I just want to understand what we're currently doing and what your ask is going forward.
Yeah, I mean, where we are situated now is about 1/3 of our funding is from the town of Oakville. We raise the other parts from, as I mentioned, the Canada Council. That's an annual grant. The Ontario Arts Council, that's another grant. We run different programs like our education program. We have a rental program that brings in income. This is, of course, limited by our spaces. When we have better spaces, larger spaces. We used to throw weddings in our facility in Ireland. I mean, we would throw these exciting, beautiful weddings. We can't really do that so well at Gerlach Gardens because there's lots of people doing their wedding photography there, which is wonderful. But an actual wedding, no. Baby showers, yes. But, so we have limitations with the site that we have. If we can think bigger, we can have a more financially stable and more financially vibrant situation for the organization. Moving forward, again, we'll be looking at a partnership with the town of Oakville, but we'll be doing the hard work of fundraising both for private income coming in, as well as those significant federal and Ontario grants that are for building facilities such as this. The model that we present in the fire hall, which I have to also emphasize along with Bill, we're very excited about this as a standalone facility. This has great potential. We've already talked with an architect about extending out from the space, building on top of the structure which is there, not even really having a tremendous architectural intervention on the structure itself, using the structure. I mean, this is a time we're concerned about finances, always concerned about finances, but also, the climate crisis is a big element here when we think about this building. And, making that building will also be financially viable. We're not going to knock it down. We're going to build upon it in a way that's sustainable.
Thanks so much,
building on that. Thank you. Just building on that issue of the fire hall. Has there been any investigation in terms of going up, like you say, using the existing space? But I'm thinking similar to what we're entertaining on the other site, either residential, commercial, something going up in height.
Yes.
To be able to maximize the yield on the property.
Absolutely.
Councillor, if I could speak to that one, Seamus. There have been discussions over the last couple of years about the potential of that fire hall site being a mixed-use development, so a residential developer who would then build a facility for the gallery at the base of that. I think a slightly smaller version of the TIFF Bell Lightbox in downtown Toronto. Our concerns are around the timeline on that. It would take quite a while, I believe, and certainly, I know this industry, to find the right partner, to find a financial deal that works for both the town and the gallery and a commercially driven developer in this market. This is not the best market to be launching new high-rise residential projects. Quite frankly, again, look at any number of stalled sites that are in Oakville, including even right in the downtown for multi-unit. We would be really at the mercy of the schedule of the developer. And that is our major concern, that it would be a long way out and that the gallery will be left behind and not be there as part of the downtown cultural hub as the other facilities get developed.
May I add to that as well? I mean, the question I think is also very interesting in letting us think about the potential of that building, and building up would be phenomenal for us, for the whole community, in that we can create more active spaces up there and put a rooftop restaurant up there. Did I get to the rooftop restaurant slide? I didn't get to the rooftop restaurant slide. That was the best slide. I saw the clock there and I chickened out and I thought I have to give the time to Bill, but the rooftop restaurant slide, can we please put that up? Because it does pertain to the councillor's question. Would that be possible? Because, I've heard so much about Sharky's. Of course, I don't know. I heard it was a great place and that there's a trauma in the town of Oakville since then, and I can feel it because, believe me, I know the importance of pubs. This rooftop restaurant, there are different variations that we can explore, but this is something I've been talking to the planners with. I see that it did appear in a report under the Performing Arts Center, which, okay, they can have one too, that'd be phenomenal. But this is something we've been talking with the planners about from our side, from the get-go. If we build up, there are wonderful possibilities. And, we're talking about a restaurant that's not chic, that's very affordable, that provides beautiful food and service for people, drinks in the summertime, and a wonderful, elegant outdoor or a covered facility in the wintertime that's built for the different seasons in Oakville and complements the landscape. I mean, this is what I think of when we think about building up. There's also the idea to have artistic projects on the rooftop of the fire hall. That tower, that wonderful tower, I don't know if you've seen it, if you've been inside and taken a look up, it's astonishing. It's this crazy tower for drying hoses. And immediately I thought this would be a great project for artists to work on annually, to do annual projects there, and to do a light tower on the tower itself that attracts people like a beacon into the center of the town. So, I mean, there are such wonderful potentials with this architecture. When we see this fire hall, when I was meeting with the architect and Bill from our board about this, we had just amazing ideas about what we could do with this facility without knocking it down and building upon it.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you. Councillor Giddings is next.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. 7 months, you've had a busy time in Canada.
I don't think it's that long. I think it's 5.
Well, winter's coming. It'll feel longer pretty soon. In your presentation, in the printed presentation, it talks about the time to build a new museum is now. We kindly request a feasibility study followed by letter of intent by December of 2023 that will lead to a memorandum of understanding. Is that realistic on your part in terms of the galleries? That timing in terms of a feasibility study?
I mean, that's probably a Bill question.
Yes, I believe it would. The feasibility would be to really assess one of the kind of key components, assess the physical structure. What can be renovated? Can we put a floor or two on top of it? What are the the life safety systems? What would be the kind of a ballpark capital cost for what we're assessing? Also for us to better understand the zoning and the setbacks. We know that there are some issues towards the sort of the west end of the site, the property as it slopes down the hill. Issues around flood. So just a proper technical study and some very preliminary design work. I think that could be accomplished in a couple of months, quite frankly, if the timing was right to go out and retain some good consultants and to take a look at it.
Thank you.
So basically due diligence on the property as it is now.
And so it would be specifically to the fire hall site. It wouldn't be conjoined with another site or, based on my reading the other day, an old one from 2015, lot number 2, when we were looking at that. So it would just be limited to the fire hall.
The only discussions we have had with town staff are about the availability of the fire hall site at this time.
All right, and looking back to exactly 8 years ago, is it still a 30,000 square foot space ballpark that you'd be looking at?
I think we need to reassess that. That was published 8 years ago, was probably developed 10 years ago. I think much has changed. I'd defer to Seamus as the executive director on the program needs.
Yeah, I think that this idea of a shared facility might have required that kind of space. In this situation, we wouldn't be looking at 30,000 square feet, it'd be smaller. That said, there was another slide I wanted to get to, and I'm seeing now that the control is here. I apologize to the team, the staff, I didn't see this control. They were doing the slides for me. There was another slide I wanted to show, if we can, I won't ask to bring it up. But there's, a big part of what I've done in programming in Austria and Ireland, and also we will see here next summer in Oakville, is outdoor programming. So in Austria, I established the first outdoor avant-garde cinema. It's a cinema of experimental film and artist films. So many artists make very interesting films. We showed these outdoors in the summertime, of course. So this is something we would also be looking to do, to take advantage of the green space around this fire hall. Instead of being in conjoined with the library in that context, if we're in the fire hall context, we'd be looking at much more programming outdoors. So that means that we wouldn't need to build a cinema inside the fire hall structure, for one. We would still be able to use a main gallery space, so the garage where the fire trucks, there's still one there if you ever care to go take a look, along with a bunch of COVID material, luckily gathering a lot of dust. That will be the main gallery space. We don't have to actually do very much to that space. I mean, Bill will probably say there's a lot more to do, Seamus, than you think, but the structure of it is already the main gallery space. So, you know, a lot of that work is already envisioned.
Thank you. In the short time you've been here, you have a lot of experience around the world. What does OG mean to Oakville? Like your impressions, I know it's fairly new, but do you have anything that makes you go, man, I'm glad I accepted this job?
I accepted this job based on a number of things, but I could say that speaking here today with you about the new museum, this whole concept of building a new museum in Oakville with the town of Oakville, with the community, with the board of directors, for fantastic artist projects. There's another slide that we could have shown of an artist project. A number of them I realized in previous roles. You know, I've worked with artists who have won some of the biggest prizes in the world. And it's not to boast, it's just that I was lucky in working with these artists before they won these prizes. We'd like to bring these artists here also to Oakville. We want to build a facility that will compete at the national level. We can do a program that will be exciting, attracting people from all different ages and groups. I believe in, you can put on an exhibition of, you know, an international program, international artists, and still get kids in there to look at these exhibitions and experience something they never did. You know, the first time I stood in front of a museum when I was an art student, I didn't want to go in, you know, I didn't want to go into the Contemporary Art Museum because I felt that it wasn't mine, that I didn't belong there. And I was an art student. I was intimidated. And we want to be able to build a museum that is accessible, that attracts people in who don't have a relationship to art, or those that do. Anybody will come in, everyone will feel welcome there. It should feel safe and accessible and give off a sense of hospitality. You know, there's a child we work with in Ireland, for example, who was from a very difficult neighborhood, an area where kids are most likely to not succeed, not finish school, get into drugs and what have you. That we had a youth group, a kids group. He was part of this. He came in over years. He began developing different projects with us, video projects and so on. He came to our staff one day and said, you know, the first day that I came into the museum was the best day of my life. This was, to this day, it raises the hairs on my neck. And that's what we can offer in the center of Oakville. This is a kind of space that touches people's lives. That's what brought me to Oakville.
Thank you, Mr. Healy.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giddings. So I've got Councillor McNeese, Mayor Burton, and then Councillor Noel. Councillor McNeese?
Through you, Chair O'Meara. Thanks for your presentation, all the insight you provided. Just had a question. Councillor Giddings kind of touched on the space needs there. So I've been to both your locations, the house and at the current Oakville Library. So combining, you mentioned space needs as well. So combining the two together, the fire hall site is large enough for your future needs, or is it more the layout of the fire hall site that's a little more open? I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. Because to me, looking at the fire hall site, it looks like it's roughly the same or smaller than...
It's smaller, yeah, it's much smaller.
So is it sort of the layout of it that is more accommodating to an art gallery than, say, an old house that you're currently in at Gerlach Gardens? Or?
Well, you see, the whole idea of a museum is a completely different thing than it was, to say, a decade ago.
Okay.
Right? I mean, museums have to undergo changes as other institutions have as well. And we've, you know, I feel that I've encountered a lot of these different models of how museums work, how they're built, how they're structured within different spaces. If you go to Berlin, if you go to different cities around the world, you'll see there are museums housed in, you know, abandoned buildings, warehouses. There's a fantastic museum in Karlsruhe that's literally in a former missile testing factory, right? The Nazis built this amazing factory where they launch missiles in the building. There's a railroad that goes through this museum space. It's phenomenal, it's huge. We're not looking at that. But this is the thing is, I see we can do something really interesting with the fire hall space as a standalone structure. And we can build upon what's already there and use the existing structure. You know, I'm a firm believer in sustainability and that museums have to take a leading role in sustainability as well. It's a very, very important element of the whole piece. So if we can get the structure, build something financially sustainable and also environmentally sustainable, you know, the architects we've been speaking with have been talking about carbon neutral building, and this is really thrilling. I mean, this is what we have to do. I feel like we don't really have a choice at this stage, right? So it's more about what possibilities are presented with the existing structure of the fire hall. It's very exciting.
Gotcha.
With the co-production with the library, it's also a thrilling project. It's just, we have been flexible. We want to think flexibly and work with the town. So if it's going to be the fire hall site, this is something that we're ready to do as a standalone project.
Okay. And then just help me understand the difference. I've always known you as Oakville Galleries, and the new proposal sort of a museum. Is there a difference between an art gallery and a museum, or is it different pots of funding, or does it open new doors considering it a museum versus an art gallery? I'm not from the world of art, so help me understand that.
Yeah, you're right. I'm also confused, and I mixed the words myself. I was actually thinking this morning, what if they asked me what art is? And I was thinking, how am I going to answer that question? Because it's the age-old question that nobody can really answer, and this is what keeps bringing us back to it. But with an art gallery museum, of course, Oakville Galleries is technically already a museum. If you look at the Constitution and so on, it already is technically a museum in 2 different spaces. The OG logo, we're changing that now. We're going to remove that, and we'll have a transitional identity until we have our new facility. And the new identity will be a new name. It will be, it might just be, the organization that I rebranded in Ireland just became The Model. That was the name of it, The Model. So it was to keep it open in terms of a identity and a name, but also to have a reference to the building, because the school was called the Model School. So we'll be going through a discussion with the board and with the community about what that new name could be. It could be something like the Museum of Contemporary Art Oakville, or it could be something less wordy. We'll have to see. But we are technically already a museum. It's just the difference between a gallery and a museum is maybe just semantics. And museums technically have a collection. Galleries can also just be commercial galleries, but they often will be interchangeable. The Art Gallery of Ontario is technically a museum. So we're all confused, don't worry.
Thanks for that clarity. That's it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McNeese. Mayor Burton, you are next. I think you're still muted, Mayor Burton.
Is there any chance I'm unmuted yet?
Perfect. We've got you loud and clear.
All right. I'm always delighted when the technology cooperates. With regard to the motion on this item, I'd like to move it, and I would like to move it with an addition to Clause D, and I would like to send that to you all so that you can see it. So I'm going to do that right now. So I've sent it to the clerk and to every member of council and to the CAO. And now I'll just explain what I'm proposing. What I'm proposing is that we expand the concepts portrayed in D to reassure the galleries that we'll study their wishes. That is to say, co-locating with the library as well as standalone. And we'll add to that evaluating the capacity of any site to support the expansion interests of the galleries. And I think we also need an analysis of the fundraising capabilities of the galleries and the timelines that they might need to raise the funds. I thought that the delegations from the galleries were concerned about the time it might take to find a partner. I'm equally concerned about the time it might take for the galleries to raise the money. Like Councillor Adams, I have served on the board of the galleries. In fact, it was the very first public participation I ever engaged in 30 years ago when my family relocated here. And I echo his caution that the fundraising ability of the galleries has, in my time, never matched its ambitions. So we need to be careful here, I think. I would like, so that's my motion as with the change I'm suggesting. By now, I believe you all have it. And there it is being displayed on the screen. And before I finish, I would just like to add an incentive to the gallery. One of the things that we will need to tend to, I don't want to include this remark in the motion, but I do want to leave it as something to be followed up on later. One of the things we as council will have to attend to if the galleries relocates to the downtown, as I think we all might like, is the Gerlach Gardens house site then needs to be disposed of. I've always believed that it should be returned to housing stock, and we should sell it to keep the gardens. Let's be clear, there's many, many acres of beautiful public gardens there, and they are one of our most popular parks, and the location of a constant stream of wedding photography, among other things. But the house should be returned to housing stock, and I don't want to speak for council, but I would support the idea that any proceeds we got from selling the house might be put to the assistance of the galleries in building their new home in the downtown. That way, we solve two problems at once, and the second problem being how to help them on their way to raise the fund. So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I hope this helps.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Burton. So Mayor Burton has has moved the recommendations with the addition to D that we just saw. So we can have that discussion in a moment. I think we have one more question for the delegate from Councillor Noel, and then I think we're going to just have some questions of staff, and then the motion has been moved though, and then we can proceed that way. Okay, Councillor has those questions as well. Councillor Noel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Most of what I was going to ask has been answered in bits and pieces, so I've got a couple follow-up pieces to my questioning. First of all, with respect to the conversation about the scale of the project, you're talking about 30,000 square feet roughly. What is, so I got most of that information, what is the current square footage of the current facility and the O2 facility? Or the OG facility at the library. So what is the current square footage of the two other facilities today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should know that. I mean, I guess it's one of those things that
I was going to ask you what is
I've only been here 5 months, so I don't have that number in my head. I'm sure Bill doesn't have it either. But I can tell you it's small.
No,
I mean,
sorry, I don't.
Yeah, it's small. We have a small, it's probably, and I think in square meters.
Yeah. Well, I can take it in meters as well.
Yeah.
If you got that.
So I know that the gallery space in Centennial is probably about 80 square meters, maybe 90 square meters. And then the house, Gerlach Gardens, is a 3-floor house. The top floor of it is not usable at the moment because there's some issues with part of the roof falling in. We have asbestos remediation that's meant to come through. Yeah. In another part of the building, we have a HVAC doesn't work. The library has problems. We also have serious problems in this building. There are 4 small gallery spaces that are each about 25 square meters. So that's about 100 square meters of exhibition space in the house, Gerlach. And then above that, there's probably, about 150 square meters of office spaces and so on. So altogether, that's 400, that's what, 4,000 square feet?
5,000 square feet.
5,000 square feet?
5,000, yeah.
Sorry for a long answer.
Plus
the studio. There's the studio as well.
As background, Councillor, the 30,000 square feet, kind of give or take, It was both developed by the consultants that were trained to do the studies that were published in 2015. I believe it was Ward 99 Architects. It was also roughly the same program that was developed by Let Architects when they looked at when the town was looking at the old high school site, either as a town facility or as a gallery. So in both cases, independent consultants with expertise in programming cultural facilities came up with roughly the comparable numbers on both of those. But again, we would say that those are both several years old, and we would take a fresh look at that now.
Have you done an actual feasibility study as to what that would look like? Because that's a considerable increase in space. I know you've blue skied a restaurant and you've mentioned a couple other things, but have you really has the board really wrapped its head around what they're asking for, or is this potentially one of these be careful what you ask for kind of scenarios?
This is part of the process of what we're doing today, is we're asking for a feasibility study to be done, to be paid for, and to be facilitated with the town of Oakville. So of course, yes, there are the blue sky ideas, but the world does get changed from blue skies ideas. So we do need a vision to make something happen. And then, as I've said to you, as we firmly believe, we are very flexible. So what constraints we come across with the fire hall site, we'll have to work around and adapt to it. This is what you see with architecture being retrofitted for different usages. There's some things you can do, there's some things you can't do, there's some things we can build onto. But as I mentioned, we have gone through the building, we've looked at it with architects, and their professional opinion is that this is doable. And I think that is enough for us to start putting forward a feasibility study and make it happen. Then all the other things fall into place.
Okay, so my follow-up to the financial piece that Councillor Adams and Mayor Burton had raised is what do you currently have in reserves for capital today? So, I mean, I've been on council a long time, and I remember at least once we've had your predecessor, several predecessors ago, coming to us cap in hand saying, we don't have any money, please give us money. So I'm curious what has transpired between then and today that's actually put you in a better financial footing to manage this. Do you have capital put aside, has been fundraising to lead to this point, or are we starting from zero?
There's a modest amount of reserves at the moment that are there just for issues that arise. We have not started a fundraising campaign because we don't have a building. So I think once we have the building, we can then put together. We've done an analysis of patrons and funders. We have a database. We've done an exercise with a fundraising consultant and so on, so to put those parts into place. So, this is something, of course, Oakville Galleries is not rich. We're not a rich institution, but we're recognized through our operational funding and our program funding. So, this is something that's very, very serious. And of course, this is all about next level. That's what it is. The fundraising we're talking about, I'll say it again, is a multi-piece fundraising strategy. It's very generous what the mayor said today. I would embrace that, what he said about the house at Gerlach Gardens. I think it's a wonderful idea. We see that as the kind of support that we welcome and that we will need. But as Bill has said, and as I will say, we have a lot of fundraising to do. And believe me, in the presentation I mentioned, and of course I was maybe a little bit nervous in the beginning, but I was in Ireland during the financial crisis, and we rebuilt a museum when there was no money in the country. I've been through this exercise before. Your question is very valid, and it's a good question, and this is something we'll face. But this is about putting the puzzle together and building it, So if we have our feasibility study and we have our site, I'll be answering these questions with far more detailed numbers than I can give you today. We need to know what's going to cost to build it before I can tell you, what all the pieces will be. This is the thing. Bill, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would only say that, and perhaps part of the feasibility study, and certainly we can assist in this. There are contemporary art museums across Canada that are community-based, municipal or not-for-profits with local support. Some really remarkable ones. North Vancouver would be a great example. that have come together through innovative partnerships, through the various government, federal, provincial government grants. They go toward capital projects, but also towards fundraising within communities and within the arts community. So this has been done, and it's been done very successfully, and some of those examples have truly added to and enriched the life of the neighborhoods and the communities where they are. So there's no reason that Oakville cannot do the same as somewhere such as North Vancouver in terms of building an outstanding contemporary art museum.
You said you've had a conversation.
And we're happy to kind of contribute some, and we're happy to give you more background as follow up on some of those models.
Sure. I apologize for talking over you. I thought there seemed to be a natural pause there. You said that you had some conversations with fundraising consultants. Did you get any sort of prognosis of what that might look like in terms of time? I know you don't know a quantum, but certainly, they would evaluate the demographics of the community, the location of other art, similar art galleries within, the market area. Has there been any consideration given as to what sort of time frame a consultant would anticipate such a capital campaign would take?
I mean, I wasn't part of that fundraising process. Again, I'm here for 5 months, so I'm looking at the reports that were handed to me. Bill, did you want to talk to that?
I don't recall if timelines were addressed at the point.
Okay. And last question, maybe a question for staff. The mayor raised it. It was one of the ones I was going to, I wanted to ask a bit more detail on. What is the future of the existing building? Has the staff given that into consideration at this point? Should this proposal move forward? The mayor talked about some blue sky concepts about returning it to housing or selling it or whatever the case is. Has the staff given any consideration to the, I guess, the physical structure as to whether it's preservable, restorable? What circumstances would come to bear in terms of the potential to generate revenue from it to contribute to the library should that piece become part of this policy?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Knoll, we have not looked at that yet. There was a resolution a number of years ago, actually by Council, that we'd be retaining it, and so we hadn't done any more work on the Gerlach at this point in time.
Now, at the time of that discussion, there was also discussion about the state of repair of that facility. Has that building been maintained since that time, or has it been upgraded so that what were at the time similar kind of terrifying kind of conditions, have those been dealt with?
I know that facilities has been looking at all of our buildings, particularly Gerlach. I don't know what work has been done in the interim since that resolution up into the current, and we can get back to you on what has actually happened on Gerlach.
Okay, and last question. I know you said that the roof is falling in, and that's a little alarming. I'm assuming you're being a little overly dramatic when you say that. I assume it's safe and stable at this time.
The building is safe and stable, but it's an old building, I mean, there are parts of the building that we cannot use, right? Small parts. But for example, we're still looking at this. The top floor of the building was used as an artist residency, and we've been told that we can't use it as an artist residency anymore because it's not, it's not up to health standards, that part. So this is a severe limitation, and this is, where am I going to put artists when we bring them here? Usually they will come and stay in the building. I've had artists stay in my house. I mean, that's literally what I've been doing, is bringing artists to my house. So, we do need to get a new structure so we can actually do what we need to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are the questions I have, but I will say that I do support the motion, and I support the mayor's recommendation as well.
Thank you. We're almost done with you here. We have a first-timer, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and then Councillor Giddings, and then I think you can rest those weary legs. Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
It's more the lips.
Thank you, Seamus. Thanks for bringing some energy and passion to the discussion about what's going to happen for the future of the galleries. Just for some clarity, because we've kind of been all over in terms of options. I am hearing that in order to move forward, certainty is at the top of your list.
Yes.
And that the fire hall is one of two options that you're excited about.
Yes. I mean, Bill might want to answer this as well, because the board have been discussions about different sites for a decade. I'm here 5 months. Only building, okay, I have been in the library, the post office. I have been in the post office site. When I went in there, I also could see the possibilities there, sharing it with the library, or as a standalone, in case we want to throw that idea out there, standalone space in the post office. Anyone, we will take it. But the fire hall, I think, is an exciting venture. As I've mentioned before, the possibilities are really exciting, and I think it would be a less expensive project. This is what Bill has mentioned to me, and we've been analyzing things. So the feasibility of it is quite attractive. The fact that it'd be standalone and we have this green space around it, for me, is very exciting. The tradition of Oakville Galleries being in a garden, I think we need to keep that. Of course, the board would have to look at this and decide, but the idea of relinquishing the house in Gerlach Gardens for another facility in downtown Culture Hub makes sense. But to have the green space around would be very, very thrilling. I think the concern is if the library is in the post office space as a standalone project, which we support, we don't want to be snookered into a situation where we have to go partner with a developer. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad idea, but that's not what we envision, and that's not what the board has agreed. So this is the thing. We are excited about a standalone project in the fire hall. If there's another possibility that emerges, phenomenal. But I think there's been so many conversations. I've looked at a number of different feasibility reports for different structures in Oakville, and you're exactly right, Janet. The time is now to decide this so that we can continue momentum and get fundraising and put together a package and make this happen.
Okay. So have you had discussions with the executive director of the public library and the public library board about an option to share the post office?
I think those discussions happened before. Bill, did you want to answer that?
No, I've been on the board for 3 years, and we've had no direct communications with the library.
Okay. And you mentioned that there are these addendums. There's these 2015 reports, which I managed to get my hands on this weekend. You've read through those?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess if certainty is what you want, what the motion on the floor does is it allows for some additional time for a possible co-location to occur. It isn't explicit, however, about a possible share of the post office. So not to put you on the spot, but unfortunately, I think I have to. Do you want a feasibility study of a co-share so that all of council is crystal clear about the pros and cons of whether or not we could have a combined galleries and central library at the post office?
I have to defer to the board on that one. Bill?
Yes, we would like that looked at, because what I believe is also being put to council today is to explore mixed-use development on the fire hall site. That was what I read. I'm not an expert on how to read the materials that are before you, but that is our concern. That decision is made, and we think that will leave the gallery behind by many, many, many years before that is likely to come to fruition.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that. My other questions are to staff. So we have a motion on the floor with an option to add a secondary.
Sorry, Councillor Haslett, can I just, if Councillor Giddings has one more question of the delegate, I will come right back to you, and we will table it and we'll deal with staff. Are you good, Councillor Giddings, with the delegate?
My question's for staff.
Okay, perfect. So no more questions of the delegation then? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all. I look forward to our future conversations as well. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Yes, and on behalf of the board, thank you for your ongoing support over all the years. And we look forward to working very closely with the council, with the mayor, with the town going forward to find a solution. And so thank you for the time this morning.
Thank you for joining us, Bill. Okay, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, the floor is yours, and anybody else who wants to ask any questions of staff now, now's the time.
So my question is about these library refinement reports, the prior downtown cultural hub reports. So there's a lot of great detail in here. I also realize 9 years has gone by. We have new and have had great leadership at the Central Library and for the library system through Tara. And I'm not understanding why these reports were not circulated to all of council and updated in order to help us appreciate some of the factors that have maybe led you to your recommendation that the post office not be shared, or that what could potentially happen on the fire hall. And I don't want to take us down a multi-year relook at the downtown cultural hub, but we have a stakeholder in the community who clearly wants to continue to participate in the vibrancy and the economic success of downtown. They felt that the post office was on the table as a shared facility. I understand there's a perception of limitation. I would just appreciate if the feasibility reports that were done could be updated with the input of the executive director of the public library and the library board and the galleries, so that we make a final decision this year for them. To make a decision without that it's detailed. I mean, we've heard today the questions about the financial model. Absolutely. The councillors' questions all around understanding the contribution levels and expectations needs to be clearer. We need to be clear about operational constraints. We need to be clear about how high can you go on the post office, and how would that affect the public realm. I think the galleries needs to make some hard decisions about their level of risk tolerance, because as Councillor Duddock said, the yield on the fire hall with some height on it is a potential loss, and yet we don't have that data. So what I have put on the floor is a deferral, Chair, that defers 1A, which is to do the work on the programming and detailed design, and number 2, which is that the location of the Central Library and the former post office site be deferred until we have those feasibilities. And it is not, I want to be very clear, the Central Library is a flagship, it is an anchor, it has always been a critical element of the success of downtown and to the community as a whole. I want to, though, make sure we have the information that we're making a great long-term decision, given the impact it has on a fundraising campaign, the impact it has on the public realm, the impact it will have on the community as a whole, who, as we know, has a strong interest in what happens to our library, to our galleries, to our performing arts center. I think we owe it to all of us to have that detail. And so that is why, Chair O'Meara, I have put the deferral motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Haslett-Thiel. I always get the fun committee meetings. So a deferral has been moved by Councillor Haslett-Thiel. So right now, the only thing we're discussing is the deferral motion. Is there any conversation? Councillor Giddings, you've got your hand up. Would you like to speak to the deferral? Okay, Mayor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will oppose the deferral. I believe the deferral is unnecessary and that all of the information that council needs has been provided. The update to the old information is not necessary to make this decision. And I don't think it'll lead us in a different place. But meanwhile, it's an urgent matter to get this downtown cultural hub back on the road. In fact, as I thought was obvious, but perhaps I should have explained in more detail, what I added to D is it was intended to flesh out the information that we needed that would assist the galleries in its what appears to be central preference, which is the standalone site on the fire hall. Producing the information, we went why it couldn't be co-located with the library. And in the council to authorize one and 1A to, because we'll never get this done if we continually delay.
Okay. Sorry, Mayor Burton, it was a little difficult to hear you at the end there. But I think I got the gist of your opposing the motion to defer, and you were flushing out a little bit more information on the motion that you put forward, and in the hopes that it would alleviate more information about co-locating with the library. I believe I just got the gist of it. I apologize for that. Sorry, I can't see my screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
It's still a little muffled, but yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Well, thank you for your effort to summarize what I said. I think that was accurate. But the main essence of what I said is we don't need this delay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also not be supporting the motion. I do believe that, particularly with the amendment that Mayor Burton put forward earlier, that we've covered off the idea that we would still consider the co-location as part of his addendum, which I support. I am not, and Councillor Haslett should be well aware of the conditions of the library, having served on the library board previously with me, that we need to start moving on the library process. The library process isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's about consulting the public, consulting the community, actually getting the staff engaged in what a future library is going to look like with all those wonderful plans that we put in place for the library, speaking as a library board. So I don't think anything rises or falls. I don't think that we are with the motion as it stands now before the deferral. There's nothing in there that would in any way eliminate the opportunity to consider a co-location. What that motion does, particularly with the amendment, it allows us to start moving the train down the track on the relocation of the library. It confirms that, assuming council supports it, it confirms the location of the library for the post office. So that's first and foremost, that's the one of the main things that has to happen in terms of the library planning process, to start socializing the community to the point of understanding that that's where the library is going to be, because there will be a lot of pushback on this. There's going to be people who are going to remember that library, their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids who were up there. So we need to start working with the community, and we need to start doing that today. This is a longish term process, and we need to take that first step. And today, this is that first step. And I would really, as a library board, long-term library board member, as a citizen, as a user of those facilities, I would really hate to put another delay in the front of anything in the downtown cultural hub. We're actually starting to see some significant progress now with this report, and I really want to see it move forward. I do support the idea of looking carefully at not amalgamating, but co-locating the museum space with the library. I think it's a great idea. And I don't see any limitations to exploring that further. I'm not super keen on the idea of taking over the fire hall space. I think that's leaving a lot of potential on the table. And you know, by basically taking the existing footprint and not building up on it or creating more public facilities. But I'm strongly in favor of supporting the motion as amended on the floor and getting our process started. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Chair O'Meara. This turned into an interesting morning, an interesting meeting, and very glad the people from the board came out to speak to us today, because I've heard a lot of different things which I was told differently before. I cannot imagine why we'd be willing to throw away money doing a detailed design when in fact we should be taking a second look at whether we should co-locate. Maybe we shouldn't, but let's make sure whether we should or shouldn't before we start throwing money at detailed design. I can't believe that we are not going to defer 1A. And also 2, I do believe the timing, like, it's not like they're going to happen overnight anyhow. I won't ramble on, but I would ask for a recorded vote on this one for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Elger. Councillor Grant.
I've been silenced. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think that both motions are trying to do the same thing, but unfortunately the deferral puts an impediment on a process that we've already heard needs to move forward rather quickly. We're not building anything right away. We're not throwing money at anything right away. We're consulting with the public to make sure that we're moving the library properly. And I would hate to think that we would put brakes on something so important just for the fact that the end goal is still in question. I mean, as we go through this process, again, we're going to learn how much money is going to be needed, how much co-locate would cost. I believe that, again, I understand the reason why one would want to place a deferral, but I think it's, in this case, a little bit too much. So I can't support the deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. I don't support the deferral. I think the mayor's motion is appropriate. At the end of the day, I think that the fire hall site is perhaps the most likely location for a new gallery site, and I think it is most likely going to be successful if it has a co-location with some kind of residential component to it. But I'm happy to have staff come back and check on that one more time. But in terms of the library side, I do think it's time to move on and make a decision. And so I'm happy to support doing that. With respect to whether the galleries could co-locate at the post office site, I suspect that it's going to delay things even further. And I think that's already been looked at. So I'm happy to move ahead and not defer it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. Further to Councillor Adams, question for the councillor. I had trouble hearing you. Was that to include the co-location of Oakville galleries with the post office, or the possibility of that?
Sorry, Councillor Giddings, my audio wasn't working quite as well as it could have. No, I think the mayor's motion is pretty clear about that. Having staff come back and look at that one last time is fine, but I don't think that requires a deferral. I think it's already effectively been reported on.
All right, I appreciate the clarification on that. And Councillor Knoll spoke to not placing any possible limitations on development to the fire hall. I've got a question for the Commissioner or our CAO on that. I think it's relevant, Chair.
Relevant to the deferral in front of us here?
To the question before us, yes. Just in terms of stable top of bank studies, the coring that's been done. Can you remind us what would be possible on that in terms of height, adjacency to the top of bank, because that would weigh into the decision?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The height and the number of units is largely dependent on how much parking we can provide underground. And as you know, there's limitations. Bedrock is fairly elevated. So we don't have at this time the amount of residential, but it is largely dependent on the amount of parking. But
all right, so we can't, we don't know factually now in terms of whether it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 10, whatever stories until more study is done on.
That's correct, and that was part of the process going forward, is to look at what's possible on that site in terms of the scale of density and the scale and density that's available on the fire hall site. So can you include accommodation for the Oakville Gallery and still get a substantial amount of residential that makes a difference? That's part of the feasibility study that we'd be looking at doing going forward.
And with the deferral, would that information be available at that time, so we have an idea in terms of what's possible on the site?
So a deferral, or regardless, the feasibility as council's directing to include co-location at the library becomes a bigger study. It would take more time. A more focused study on a fire hall site would take considerably less time. You fold into that the different options and what needs to happen to co-locate a facility with the Oakville Galleries with the library. It would take more time and is more complicated to think through. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, that does. It's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you very much. So speaking to the motion, I'm not able to support it either. We don't know what's going to be available on the site, and I don't see why we can't follow through with Oakville Galleries in terms of the Canada Post site specifically being mentioned in that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I've got a first timer is Councillor Nanda.
Thank you, Chair O'Meara. Just wanted to get some clarification. I'm not sure if my council colleagues or someone can answer. Is there a way to put these together? We're trying to get an understanding of the mayor's motion and the deferral by Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel. Are we able to get some of the information that the councillor requires through the mayor's motion, or is it going to be completely either we have to decide on having it on this site and then not be able to get information on whether it works on that site? I'm trying to get a better understanding.
So right now, the motion before us is to defer the mayor's motion with his amendment on that. If that deferral fails, sorry? Oh, sorry, to defer, to defer.
1A and number 2.
And number 2, okay. Okay, sorry.
So that's what I was trying to get a better, is it not to do all of what
No, it's not. So
it
would be those 2 elements, okay? If that defers, then we can have all the questions we would like about the motion that the mayor moved, because that would then take precedent, because that what was on the floor before the deferral was brought up. So right now, we're just talking about the deferral on 1A and 2. And you can ask questions on the merits of deferring those 2 issues right now. And we'll get to a point very quickly where we call a vote on that. If that fails, then you can ask any questions about the recommendations that the mayor put forward after that.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I've changed the audio input so maybe you can hear me better. One of the points I was striving to make was that the information being requested in the name of this deferral's request for information, that information's coming as part of what I moved on D. And we need to get started on as Councillor Knoll pointed out, we need to get started on this. The council will be able to add a presence for the galleries in the library if the information comes back saying that that's a supportable thing, and otherwise, but we got to get the show on the road here. And, this assumption that you can't make a decision is how nothing gets done.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I have Councillor Chisholm as a first time. I've got Councillor Knoll, Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel for a second time. Okay, Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question and understanding where we're going with this, and I'm in support of the mayor's amendment or motion to it. My concern is this: is that in the past, I'm going to use a little bit of history. Sometimes we repeat ourselves if we don't get this right. We've had projects in the past with the town with respect to getting involved in partnerships and relationships, and they fall through. And unfortunately, the town is holding, for the sake of argument, the bag. So I would like to understand the clarity from staff there. I believe there is a very detailed policy with respect to relationships when we get into these developments things. I can go in the past of looking at the the stage at Coronation Park, or the skateboard park out in Bronte, where we had this same situations, and it was not successful. But it held our projects up by 2 years because of trying to work with our organizations, and unfortunately the money wasn't on the table. So at the end of the day, I just need clarity to pull out of the archives if there is that policy with respect to working with our organizations in project management, and also developing projects and facilities for our community organizations. So I just leave it as that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got second timers here, Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and then Noel. And Councillor Nanda, is your hand still up for more questions? No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, then Councillor Noel.
I just want to ask staff, in deferring 1A, which is programming and detailed design for the replacement of the Central Library, the former post office, in terms of getting an update to the feasibility of a co-share, how long do you feel you would need to update the hard work that was already done to a possible feasibility study of a co-share? Because I'm hearing from my council colleagues, they're open to the possibility of a co-share, and they're open to having that information shared, but they want to make sure we're moving forward. So can you give me a sense around timing to do that work, to give us an updated report, and to give us the possibility of what a co-share could look like?
So I think we'd estimate the time, through you, Chair O'Meara, we would estimate the time frame to do the feasibility or the work on a co-location about the same time as it takes to do the bulk of work that you see in front of you in the recommendation itself. So the spring of 2024, we would be reporting back, which would include a report on the potential options for co-location and the implications of that. The reason the programming, the 1A is in there, is that if it stays then there and we continue to proceed with the programming element, we're able to understand what that library looked like. We can actually go on to detailed design. So by the spring of 2024, council can make some decisions on where they go. You have the information to decide on a co-location. You have the information on the library at the post office site. You'll have the information about the options for the galleries, either standalone or with the residential. And the addition of the fundraising component from the galleries would also assist council in your deliberation of the potential for those things to happen. So by keeping 1A in, it doesn't lose any time. I think Councillor Algar had a point about you're duplicating studies. You are. You're spending probably about another $100,000 to do the co-location, but you could very well spend that amount in repairs to the library, because if you don't include the programming, you're delaying the library considerations 10 to 12 months.
Yes.
Okay, so for my own clarity and perhaps the public's, you're not talking about architectural design. You're talking about how the Central Library would be programmed and the services that would continue or possibly be added to a Central Library. But will it include an option of co-location?
Based on the resolution, or based on the motion that the mayor had put forward on co-location, it would include looking at not the detailed or architectural design, but it would be very similar to the work that we had done in 2015, which was available through that overall council report that showed how you could fit those two facilities together so that they could still function, do all the things, where's the shared elements between them. That's the level of detail I think you'd be looking for in terms of understanding whether a co-location is a feasible option for us to move forward.
Okay, and so it's work that would, you're saying it's work that helps advance it forward, but we haven't lost the potential opportunity of council making a decision to co-locate the galleries and the library in the post office. because the language in the mayor's motion does that. It states the fire hall, it doesn't state the post office. And I'm appreciative that we were on sort of the similar path of how do we get more fulsome information. And believe it or not, I am on the same path of trying to move us along. I'm not seeing clarity that we are going to give an analysis of the co-location for the galleries and the library. And that is why the deferral is on the floor, because it doesn't say that we would do that. It says co-location, but we then confirm that the central library is at the post office, and we've moved one of the chess pieces that we have. Perhaps the mayor would agree that we add the phrase, including the post office on the co-location for clarity, then perhaps the deferral motion doesn't need to be heard. But I don't see that clarity here.
Please, Madam CAO, I think you want to
I
add
would
something.
interpret this as including co-location with a library on the post office site, and it's or a location in the other. So if the words of post office were added in, it would just add some additional clarity. But that's how I would read the recommendation already in front of you.
And we would have your assurance that we would have the fullness of those feasibility studies updated, so we are not, so we have what we need to make final decisions.
What you would have is an update to the previous work that was done that actually looked at the feasibility of putting those two facilities together in one building.
And could that include having the galleries board and executive director meet with the public library executive director and boards and really talk about that?
Absolutely. In the 2015 work, there was a lot of coordination between the library and the executive director at that particular time.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, so I've got another four in front of me. Councillor Knoll, you're up.
To start, I mean, it sounded like the train was moving on potentially withdrawing that amendment, and then I could stand down. Otherwise, because I think the councillor got the assurance I think she was looking for. Are you removing your amendment through you?
So I believe there was a, just Madam CAO's clarification, you believed if we just added a couple of words to the mayor's motion about with the post office, which you take to be the direction anyway, but if the mayor was amenable to add those two words into his motion, then we might have a withdrawal of the deferral. Am I summarizing that the way that I think you were saying it?
Yes, I would read the resolution as it is, as including the post office co-location, but if it gives council clarity that that's exactly what we're doing, by all means, the words would provide you that clarity.
And Mr. Chair, since I have the floor, I just want to indicate that if we approve the recommendation as amended, it already confirms our desire to move the library to the post office, and therefore, if its co-location consideration is with the library, then that happens automatically.
Okay, that's how I understand that. Yeah. So again, you still have the floor, Councillor Knoll.
Well, I'm hoping my work is done here.
Okay. Next up, we have Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Chair O'Meara. I must say I was a little disappointed today to learn that from the board member that for 3 years there's been absolutely no discussion with the library at all. That was a bit of a shocker when I heard that. But just moving forward, 1A, the part that bothers me, CAO closely, is the word detailed design. Can you explain what does detailed design mean? It's different than what I thought it meant maybe, but what is detailed design for that location?
Detailed design, so 1A would include understanding what are the programming needs of the library and what is the actual architectural design so that we can move forward fairly quickly with getting that building built. So it is the detailed work.
Okay, so there's where I'm bothered, because right now that detailed design is here's what we're going to do. That's the plan. That does not include anything to do with the arts gallery or anything like that, though.
So I think what you're asking for is two streams of work. We'll continue to move forward with the programming and detailed design with a standalone library at the post office site. And at the same time, we'll also continue to look at the co-location. So when we report back in the spring of 2024, you'll have all the information in front of you to make a decision which direction you want to go. If you move into the co-location work, then we'd have to do the detailed design in order to actually make that work. If you don't decide to go with the co-location, then we're ready to move forward with the library right away and get the library built, because we do see some urgency in getting the new library in place.
So if we go with what 1A now says, you will be going ahead with the detailed design solely for the library at that location.
That's right.
So then how much money, what's the ballpark money that could be thrown away if during all of this time we decide we're going to co-locate and you have to toss that plan out? Like, are we talking $100,000, $10,000?
So as a result of the addition of the co-location, to look at that, I think there's probably about $150,000 that we'd be adding to the overall cost to study the co-location.
The co-location, and
Yeah.
because it's going to cost $100,000 to do probably without the co-location anyway. So that would be the wasted money of not doing it, not waiting and doing it afterwards.
It depends at the end of the day which option you go with. If you decide to go with the standalone library, then yes, you're right. It is the $100,000 that you might have spent otherwise. If you decide to go with a co-location, it would be the programming and detailed design costs that would be wasted.
So does detailed design include the architecture at all?
Sorry, if I can just clarify. Not entirely though, because I think there's a lot of that detailed design into the post office, which could be brought over to a co-location. So it wouldn't be 100% waste of that programming and detailed design dollars.
So what is detailed design? Is architecture? Is it not how architecture of the structure of what it overall will look like?
Yep, it is the detailed design of the building. It's a heritage structure. We need to understand how that works, how the parking works, the entrances, the exits, the actual architectural design of the building.
So, like, does that make sense to go ahead and do that if in fact we do co-locate? That's my only concern. Like, would we not want to say, whoa, wait a minute. Let's find out, are we going together or are we going alone? Like, wouldn't that make more common sense instead of the train has already gone down the station based on this recommendation. If Janet pulls the deferral, 1A says here, the train is going this way and we're going to do the architectural design today. We're going to start. Well, then all of a sudden we're going to come back in a few months and say, whoops, we're trying to do a U-turn with the train and now we're going 2. Like, that's where I'm having trouble with 1A, on just that word detailed design.
So the staff recommendation is that we move forward with the library as a standalone because of the urgency of replacing the library. So there is an urgency question, which is why the programming and detailed design should continue. We could look at the programming as the first element, understand where we're going on the co-location as we go further. As the gallery also does some financial work, because the cost of a shared location at the post office, I'm assuming, will be much larger than perhaps a standalone at the other, perhaps. So that gives us a little bit more information, which maybe helps us push back the detailed design a bit if we see the situation changing. So
bingo, you just nailed it. How can we do that?
I think you leave the resolution as it is. And we could look at that as we're moving forward with those various pieces and our discussions with the galleries continue. So we'll start with the programming element, first of all, to understand what the programming, which we have to do anyway in order to do the detailed design, as the other pieces are also coming in to understand. This is a good 10 months, I think, until the spring that we'll have the series of studies ongoing.
Okay, so like, I think everybody wants to get to where we want to get this done, but we want to get it done right and not waste money. Like, can staff maybe report back on maybe 1A on, maybe we could drag our feet on the putting in the words detailed design? Like, let's just get I want to get this movement and we spend enough time. And if Councillor removes the deferral, then I think I would agree, but it's that word detailed design, which is actual architectural design, that I don't want to waste money on. So if staff can.
I think we've heard, Councillor Larger, staff are on board with that.
Yeah, I think so.
I think they've said we're going to do it and we're going to move forward with that. So At this point, we have the deferral on the floor right now for 1A and item 2. I'd like to call a question unless Councillor Hazathiel.
Chair O'Meara, I am prepared to remove the deferral off the floor and support Mayor Burton's motion with the assurances that we've now had from the CAO. And I thank my council colleagues for the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hazathiel. So the deferral has been withdrawn. Thank you very much, Councillor Elgar. So we are back to the mayor's motion with the amendment as it was. So at this point, are there any questions of staff on the recommendations in its entirety? Is it Councillor Elgar and Hazathiel? You have your hands up. I'm not sure if you. Perfect. No problem. So if having seen no other questions, I'll call the vote. Any objections? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have item 5.2, the resource requirements due to legislative changes. We do have a presentation from our Director of Planning Services, Gabe Charles. Director Charles, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair O'Meara. I think it's still morning. And to members of council, members of committee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the resource requirements that we have been looking at over the last year. I'm here on behalf of a number of departments as we've been working through our review of how we are undertaking our development review process. And this is with respect to the new legislation that council has seen over the last few years. I'm sure council is exhausted from listening to us at this. I'm a bit of a broken record, I know. As we've been going through the legislation to understand how is this affecting the way in which we undertake the scope of development. And that's because the legislation that has been brought down has significantly changed the way in which we are able to review applications. Not necessarily the premise of what we're reviewing, but certainly the way in which we are doing that, and we are engaging our partner departments. And as a result of that review, as we've been going through trying to understand how do we modernize our system, how do we ensure that it is streamlined and efficient for our customers, what are the resources that we'll need to make in order to continue to provide that service. So just very high level summary of the changes that we've seen through the various bills of late. With Bill 109, the biggest change that we saw from that was the refunding or potential refunding of development application fees if council's not able to make a decision within the legislated timeframe. So it's not to say that the timeframes had changed at all. It was just simply that now municipalities will be penalized if a decision isn't made on within that timeframe for rezonings and for site plan applications. Bill 23, when that came through, made a sweeping change to, I can't even remember now, maybe 9/11 statutes at the time. And it also brought forward the housing targets. So in addition to that, in addition to removing upper tier planning responsibilities with having the responsibility of conservation authorities, those responsibilities are now coming down to the local municipalities. So as we've been working through adapting to what those changes mean, we've been looking at how does that affect our overall processes. The other big change that came through with Bill 23 was removing the ability to review development applications for residential uses for 10 units or less. That changed a little bit with Bill 97 when it was looking at reinstating the potential of that site plan control. We're still evaluating what that is going to mean for the town and how we're going to be able to update that as it relates to applications which are within proximity of a shoreline and or a railway corridor. Those types of things that we need to continue to review and understand. The other thing that Bill 97 did was affecting the provincial policy statement, because the intent of the government was to amalgamate the PPS along with the growth plan to create a new provincial planning statement. And as part of that, it also affected how we're looking at major transit station areas, how we're dealing with employment lands, et cetera. So all of these changes that have been made have had that effect of really trying to understand how we are going to be tackling this work going forward. As council may recall, budget committee last year had provided the benefit of us adding a couple of additional planners to our teams. We've been blessed in being able to add 2 out of those 3 positions. And the reason that was important is because the exercise of doing development review doesn't just fall to the planning department. It is a comprehensive undertaking on behalf of a number of town departments and obviously outside public agencies. One could think of it that the planner is almost the quarterback on a file. However, we can't do the work we need to do without the benefit of that technical review from our sister departments. So that includes transportation and engineering, includes zoning, it includes parks, et cetera. So with the changes that were made, and we continue to review the responsibilities that we will now be taking on with the conservation authorities, how we are reporting on the legislative changes, that was something that came through with the regulation after Bill 23. We're now required to report up to the province quarterly and annually. That has taken some time to understand how we are going to be doing that. The implications to fee refunds, which we're looking to not do, as well as on the heritage side, as council is aware, we're continuing to bring forward new designations as we move forward to transition properties of interest from those that are listed to ones that are going to be designated. And all of this requires support from other departments, as well as the way in which we are updating and modernizing our processes, as I noted. So that has culminated in this list. There are 11 positions here. There are others that we have identified. What we are trying to ensure is that we're being conservative right now and really suggesting to council these are the spots that we are going to need that assistance in order to be able to meet those legislative timeframes. What this amounts to is about 1.5 million on the operating side. Now, that is to say that's not all on the tax levy. We are still working through the financial model to understand what would be cost recovered through the application fees, so that we are lessening that burden on the tax levy to the greatest extent we can. That information will be brought forward to council when next we meet. I believe through the commissioners' presentations to council will be able to provide some more detail to how the breakdown will work on those positions. And I know I went through that rather quickly. I know you've had a busy morning, but certainly if there's any questions on that, I'm here as well as members of the team to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Charles. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, for the presentation. I appreciate it. But I think I remember hearing that the Premier said he was going to make us whole. Can we not just send a little interim note to the Premier and ask him to send us $1,490,000 for 2024 just to get us through this little bit of staff we have to have because of what he's done? Like, can our financial staff, our CAO, not send a letter and just get it sent from the Finance Department of Ontario? Is that not possible?
Through you, Chair O'Meara. We are keeping track of the costs that we are incurring as a result of the changes to the legislation. And at the point in time when the province is actually looking at a lot of the audits in Peel in order to understand what they think their obligations are. So at the appropriate time, we will certainly send them that bill.
So where we do need the staff, and I'm not arguing that we need the staff based on how they've compressed the time frame, so that, you can only squeeze something so much. Do we have any hope that that will ever happen, that we will get money? Like, does staff talk to the provincial staff, and is there a feeling they do have that pot of gold for us that we can all dig into?
I have no understanding whether or not they're agreeable or not agreeable to it at this point in time.
That's what I was concerned about. I thank you for that. Thanks.
Councillor Giddings.
Further to Councillor Elgar's question, through you, Chair. You mentioned that you would be coming back to council with a report in terms of what percentage of that would be coverable, if you will, in terms of permitted fees. Would that be next cycle?
Through you, Chair O'Meara, that would come back as part of the budget process. So we'll be looking at the funding sources.
All right, thank you. And In terms of, curious about what areas of planning have been been streamlined, I guess, through with the online portal, and how close are we to having those other items being included in that process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're currently working through the planning applications. We had a number of the, what I'll call the lesser intense applications available online through the portal. As we're working through what our digital tools are, it's how we marry up those tools to the functionality of the portal. So our process is entirely digital right now. It's a little bit cumbersome because we do it via email and et cetera, but it doesn't have that one window approach. That's what we're working through this year, is exactly that type of work, and that's the kind of support that we're looking at, for example, strategic business analyst. Those are the types of positions that assist us as we work through the streamlining of the application to be able to get it ready so that we can put those types of things online.
Excuse my ignorance on the process. Will that allow proponents to post directly without the need for emailing or any other cumbersome, like, does it make it faster for them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's exactly the intent, is to provide that ease for the customer, but also for the customer to be able to track the applications as well. So rather than having to pick up the phone or drop us an email to understand the status, they're able to check that themselves directly through the website.
So it could be substantial savings in time and money.
That's our intent, yes.
Sounds good. That isn't to be confused with the building permit process, correct?
That is correct, and through you, Mr. Chair, the building permit process is working through that online portal process as well, going through the building department.
All right, and in terms of the staffing, I agree with Councillor Elgar. We can't send that request until we find out what the savings are, because in fairness, we'll have to deduct that. In terms of trees, I understand the changes, and it spoke in the report about how we don't have the ability under the Planning Act to save the trees in the proximity of the build. Nothing has changed with that, though. That's been in place for some time, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hazeltine.
Thank you, Chair O'Meara. Can you just help me understand a little bit more from a site plan and a DSP? We had this process before. We had staff going through it before. We now have provincial legislative changes that limit the scope of what we can do. But we're now adding staff to support some of those, I guess the only word I can think of is a workaround. So could you maybe just fill in a little bit more around the why we need some of these additional development engineerings, and your partner's standing right there to rescue you.
I feel like I have a shadow all of a sudden.
I just want to understand it a little bit more, because I certainly appreciate we do need to be able to respond to people. We need to be able to move the process. The province should keep us whole, but we did some of this work before and we had those staff, so I'm just not understanding the additional headcount.
Through you, Chair O'Meara, there are a couple of stages and elements that are impacting this. With the elimination of site plan and the DESP process for residential of 10 units and less, they do go directly to a building permit now. As part of that building permit review, we conduct a cursory grading review before the building permit is issued. So that has to be completed within the 10-day legislated timeline for building permits. Following the issuance of the building permit, there may still be grading work that requires a site alteration permit. So then that review is conducted by the development engineering technologists as well.
And are those different people than we had before?
No. So through you, Chair O'Meara, we're still using we still have our team of development engineering technologists that do the review. We have that extra step at the building permit stage now that we're conducting, and that time pressure of needing to respond within the 10 days.
Okay, so this will help with meeting that time requirement.
That's correct.
Okay. My other question is around tree protection, and Councillor Giddings, there's a reason we work so well together, because we always ask similar questions. Will this additional tree protection inspector help us ensure that outside of the building footprint, the trees on private property have proper protection around them while the construction is occurring? Because we faced through the summer some difficulties of getting people out to site to ensure that that protection was there. And we're talking about trees that will not be replaced for at least a generation. So does this help us provide greater support around the private tree protections that we had already agreed as a council we needed?
Through you, Chair O'Meara, that this extra additional position would assist with that. We have, through our review of what Bill 23 means and the elimination of site plan and all of that, it did not reduce the amount of work that we need to do with respect to protecting the trees on private property. And so this would provide additional capacity to allow us to support that role.
Thank you for answering that. And I just have one last question for Director Charles, and that is around the digitization. So, and it may be the CAO who answers it, is there a common platform for review of applications where commenting is done on that application? So I'm familiar with a piece of software called Bluebeam from other parts of my life, but will we have a common commenting platform so we can have simultaneous review occurring as well as improving the portal and receipt of an application?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly the intent. Is yes, we were using Bluebeam. We found that it had some limitations in terms of our overall business process. The intent with the product that we're going in now is that it's not just being able to use it in-house, but we can have other public agencies be able to use a similar product to be able to feed into the system, so that similarly we're not having to email applications out to other agencies. We're able to actually work through the online platform in the same way. And that being able to then automate our database as well. So that the intent is for this to be seamless. This is why it's taking a little bit of time as we go through and we kind of peel back the layers on the onion to really understand how these all have to work together, how that it's an integrated system.
So my last question is around timing, but CAO Closey, you have a comment.
I rise only because, through you, Councillor Mayor, I just wanted to go back to the question that you had asked Director Stephen on the staffing implications. And I did want to point out that, well, all of the changes has resulted in us having to deliver things faster, which is generating the need for staff. Most of the things that we had done before, and I say most of the things we've done before, we're shifting to other things. So we're relying more on the private tree bylaw, we're relying more on the grading plans that happen through building in order to cover off the things that council. But there is still a gap on the trees, which I do want you to recognize. And that gap is through the site plan process, the DESP process that we had before. We could look for compensation around trees that were being eliminated as outside of the building envelope as a result of the construction. We're not able to do that. We're able to only enforce what is in the private tree bylaw. So there are some limiting elements that this new legislation has had introduced on the tree side of it. So I just didn't want you to, with the impression that we can do everything we've done before, because that's not actually the case.
So I thank you for that clarification and another gift to the negative on green from our province.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe your question was related to the timing to work through this. The team is actively working on it right now. I would like to see that this is going to be in operation towards the end of next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McNeese.
Through you, Chair O'Meara. So just so I understand, I know a lot of responsibilities, I guess we could say, got downloaded on the municipality from the region, and we know that in a few days or 5 days, a facilitator will be there at the region. Do we anticipate there's going to be more? I know it's hard to predict, but this sort of encompasses everything we know that the region will not be doing, the municipality will have to take over? Or are we anticipating that more may be downloaded to the municipality and we'll have to take another look when the facilitator's done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, great question. I don't know that the province has ever done in terms of what they're looking at. We'll see what it is that the facilitators recommend. From a planning perspective, we understand that the municipality will be subsuming the region's official plan, and we're going to have to go through an exercise of how do we take that plan and adopt that as our own, and to what extent, and that's going to take us some time to work through that analysis. The region has already been working through a number of initiatives to understand and to really prepare, I guess we'll say, for the facilitator to identify their roles, their responsibilities, and how they're working through a number of the different initiatives that they have.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, so everything we know to date, taking over the regional official plan, things like that, this staffing level will allow you to do what's currently known?
Through you, Mr. Chair, for now, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of staffing, number of new staff are going to be onboarded if this goes through. Just wondering how we compare with other municipalities where a lot of industries are calling back workers 2 days a week, 3 days a week, hoteling. How do we onboard these potential staff and so that they can be brought up to speed, share their experiences, become part of a team? I know it's part of a broader question, probably for CAO Closey. Just wondering, are we looking at those policies currently so we can get the most out of them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the onboarding that we've had with the new staff that we've hired has gone seamlessly. We do, even though there's a mandate in terms of the number of days in per week, that doesn't slow people down. There's certainly a benefit to meeting in person and getting people up to speed. I mentioned the benefit of us being able to hire an environmental planner. This person came to us from Conservation Halton and has been absolutely seamless, and she's been an absolute godsend to the work that we're doing, and has been fit right into the team from day one, and has pointed out a lot of things that we need to improve in terms of our overall processes, so that there is that continued integration with the conservation authorities, for example. In terms of our overall policies, Commissioner
Garvin? I can offer this, Mr. Chair, as someone who was onboarded during a hybrid work environment, I can say that to be successful, you need to be very intentional on creating opportunities for people to meet and gather. And I will compliment, and he would not do this himself, but Director Charles is very good at helping his staff be intentional about meeting and collaborating. So, so it's something that you do have to be aware of. It is a bit of a challenge. It takes more time and probably more thought than we would have given in the past. But I can say that this organization, top to bottom, is very good at having adapted to including and helping people feel part of the team. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Giddings. Thank you, Commissioner and Director Charles. So at this point, if there are no other questions, I'd be looking for a mover for the report. Councillor Grant, any objections? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you. The next item for discussion is 5.3, the seasonal commercial patio program. And I believe we have a presentation from our Director of Economic Development, Rebecca Storms. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Through you, Chair O'Meara. So patios have existed in Oakville for over a decade. What started off as one-off requests to set up patios turned into a pilot program and then was transformed again through the COVID-19 pandemic and the Commercial Recovery Initiative. We're at a point now where a permanent program is needed, both for our internal resourcing, but also to provide certainty for our patio operators. So this program is essentially a new level of service, and we're recommending that the costs associated with this program, as outlined in the report, be included in the 2024 budget. So why is the program important? I think you all know this here, but patios can foster a sense of connection, enhance social interactions, and contribute to the well-being of our community. They provide valuable support to our local businesses, which we saw through the COVID-19 pandemic, and they bring traffic into our business districts. They provide those gathering spaces and make Oakville a destination for residents and visitors and really create a sense of identity and of place. I wanted to highlight for Council that our goal in developing this program was really to create participation in the program and not obstacles. So over the course of 2023, staff have been working on creating a permanent program. Appendix D of the report shows the draft framework for the program. We want to undertake additional consultation with the BIAs, with Council, with our restaurants to gain feedback on this draft to make sure we're not missing anything. And we'll be doing that over the fall and bringing back the final program to Council for approval in Q4. We're also working with engineering firm SEMA Plus to finalize some details around barrier requirements, which we want to complete before we finalize the program. That said, the costs associated with the program, we aren't really expecting to change with the additional consultation, as they're going to apply no matter what the program is. It's things like staff costs, purchasing the barriers. So we're pretty comfortable with the numbers that we've provided in this report and that they won't change. I wanted to touch briefly on the consultation that went into developing this framework. So the development of the program really builds on years of working with restaurants, their neighbors, Council, the BIAs, and responding to other feedback that we've received over the course of those temporary programs. We also completed an environmental scan of 15 Ontario municipalities to gain a better understanding of how their programs run. Our main stakeholder engagement took place over this past summer. We issued 3 surveys from mid-June to the end of July to gain feedback on the program. We had over 1,000 responses to the public survey. We got 29 restaurants complete the survey and 14 non-food businesses completed their surveys. Overwhelmingly, what we saw was support for a patio program. We did receive valuable feedback regarding participation costs, standards and regulations, the use of parking spaces, and we incorporated those into the development of the draft program. We did also offer one-on-one interviews with our current restaurant participants, but there was relatively limited uptake on that. So while this presentation is really focused on the cost of implementing the program, I did want to touch a little bit on what's going to be new, or what's new in the draft seasonal program. Much of it is similar to what you've seen in the previous years. We're just looking to formalize it. So a couple key items. We're going to have a maximum of 2 parking spaces per restaurant. Will be based on frontage. There will be no limit on the maximum parking spaces in a block. So theoretically, an entire block of parking could be used for patios. As in 2023, we're going to require safety barriers going forward for on-street parking spaces. And we're also looking to have a scoped application period for those on-street patios. And we'll do it a little bit earlier than we've done in past years, which will allow us to better coordinate those approvals and as well as the barrier installation. From an administrative perspective, we're recommending that we reintroduce fees, which I'll get into. We're requesting a new FTE who will be responsible for the coordination of the program amongst other responsibilities. The roles and responsibilities for staff will be better defined. We'll be developing a standards manual and process guide. We're looking to automate processing and tracking and develop an appeals process. So those are some of the new items. So I want to touch on what goes into delivering this program. So really we have a program core team, which includes staff from planning, transportation and engineering, MES, economic development, roads and works, and parks and open space, depending on the location of the patio. Ultimately, these are the subject matter experts who make the decisions. They review and approve the applications, they do inspections, they install the barriers. In some cases, building and fire may be involved, determining if a structure requires a building permit or to provide heater standards and inspections as needed. The next piece of this puzzle is this new FTE, who I'm referring to as the commercial area coordinator. So in developing the patio program, it was clear that the popularity and uptake of the program has outgrown the ad hoc staff supports assigned in the pilot years, and a dedicated coordination, liaison, and promotion role is required to successfully implement the program. The FTE would reside in the Economic Development Department, with the program estimated to account for approximately 30% of their time. This is a centralized coordination role, which was once shared by staff from the other departments who are now able to return to their core responsibilities. The Economic Development Department has other program pressures and will be submitting a request for the additional 70% of a position through the regular budget process. This additional role will be dedicated to supporting small businesses. They would be a first point of contact for our BIAs, as well as businesses located within the BIAs and other commercial areas, and providing support is needed. While the Economic Development Department has historically been focused on medium and large-sized office and industrial, there's increasingly a need to support our smaller Main Street businesses, to be out there connecting with these businesses, understanding their challenges, providing assistance in navigating town hall and other region-wide resources, and also to proactively understand the issues that they're facing and that the town faces in attracting new Main Street businesses to our commercial areas. So the last group helping pull off this patio program, I'm going to refer to as the program contributors and the program champions. So contributors are the other internal departments such as finance, communications, legal, clerks, IT, and SBS, who all have roles that contribute to the success of this program. And our program champions are our partners and stakeholders, including the BIAs, you as counselors, the restaurateurs, retailers, etc. So this chart shows the cost to run the program. This first row of staff time includes applications, inspections, and monitoring. This includes both direct and indirect costs associated with delivering the program and is an estimate based on the number of patios that were approved in 2023 and on the rates and fees for permits, which I'm going to go over in the next slide. The second line is the estimated cost of time for the new FTE related to the program. The Amanda portal is a one-time cost to build an online portal. The barrier purchase, right now, this is an estimate. We're still working with the engineering firm to determine the final product that we will have, and we'll know more when that happens. This would not be an annual cost. This is a one-time fee, and based on the work we have so far, we're expecting a minimum lifespan of 10 years for the product. The deployment of barriers, so this is the cost for staff to take them out, set them up, and then pick them up at the end of the season. This was based on the cost in 2023 staff time, but could change depending on the type of the barriers that are selected, as well as our new approach in 2024 to trying to do a more coordinated application process so that staff can go out one time to deliver the barriers. So we're hoping that may change some of the time associated with deployment. The last line item here is the parking space reserve. So as you know, parking is a self-sustaining operation supporting parking programs and assets. It relies on the collection of fees to maintain the reserve, or alternatively be sustained through another source such as the tax stabilization reserve. The number here shown is essentially the cost of those parking spaces, and it's based on an estimated use of 30 spaces for an entire 6 months of the program using a daily rate of $12. So what does this mean for program participants? All participants are going to be required to get a patio permit based on the type of patio they have. So this chart shows the full 2024 rate by patio permit type, as well as the proposed amounts to include in the 2024 rates and fees schedule. The full rate includes direct costs such as staff time associated with processing applications, issuing permits and monitoring, and as well it includes indirect costs such as corporate support have been included. So starting in 2024, staff are recommending that we implement a cost recovery model for the patio program, as the town's user fee procedure states that when a service or activity is provided by the town confers a direct benefit on an individual, identifiable group, or business, that a user fee will be set to recover the cost of providing that service. However, where it is determined that a service or activity confers a direct benefit to the individual, or in this case, businesses, but also results in benefits to the general public, it will be partially funded by other revenue sources by way of a subsidy. Given the feedback that we received through the survey, there's an overwhelming support for the program from residents and visitors, and we see the positive impact that the patio program has on the broader community. And as such, staff recommend the user fee recovery be set at 30%. So in the last column is the proposed 2024 permit fee, which is the amount the participants would actually pay for a permit application using that 30% cost recovery model. This rate also reflects what staff believe is a reasonable rate for the market when compared to the other municipalities that we looked at. Should council feel more comfortable with a higher fee recovery, we also included the 50% cost recovery calculation as well. So while all types of patios will pay a permit application fee, on-street parking spaces will have additional costs associated with them, such as a parking space rental and a barrier rental and deployment and takedown. So the parking space model is also set at the 30% recovery and works out to be $562 per parking space for the entire season. The cost for the rental and deployment of barriers is still to be determined because we have not finalized the type of barrier to be used. But this is the estimate that we haven't included this because we don't have a finalized number. The rental fee would be looking to recover 50% of the cost of the barrier over the expected lifespan, which, as I said before, we're estimating to be at least 10 years. So with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have, and there's also a number of representatives from that core team here that can answer questions as well.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That was a great presentation. Councillor McNeese?
Through you, Chair O'Meara, thanks, Rebecca, for that presentation. It's very comprehensive, and I appreciate your work on this throughout the pandemic and up to this point. So just a couple questions. I know we sort of piloted something in Bronte this season where we used a curb lane. And it just so happened to be, you know, there was a driveway, I think maybe a fire hydrant. There weren't parking spots there for good reason, but it seems to have benefited the small businesses in the community quite well. Would that be included? I know we talk a lot about using parking spots and sometimes reversing the sidewalk location, but would we be precluded from being a little creative and just seeing the dynamics of the road and, you know, what might be able to be adjusted?
Through you, Councillor O'Meara. No, we wouldn't be precluded from looking at options, and this is what we're trying to finalize through the program, which we'll bring back in Q4. One of the things we've discussed is that we don't want to move the sidewalks into the parking spaces sort of on our main streets, but on the side streets, it would be something that we could consider. So in the case in Bronte, that would still be something we could look at, have the patio take up the entire sidewalk and then move the pedestrians into the lane. So I think we still will have flexibility in that
Okay,
space.
so even though it's not designated parking spots we're using on the street, we'll still be able to explore opportunities like that?
Yes.
Okay. Just on the safety barriers, I like the idea of the town getting it, because I know we went through the process of having them privately rented this year and it's very costly, so it seems like it would be a win-win if the town sort of procures those. And I saw an estimate of about $50,000. Do you have any rough idea how many that would be, or?
That was our estimate based on the use of 30 parking spaces, but really it's going to depend on the type of barrier that we select. So the Ontario Traffic Council had come up with their guidelines for what they wanted, but given sort of the context in Oakville, a lot of our parking is lay-by parking, we wanted to look at something more Oakville specific. So I don't know the cost, but we're hoping to have that soon, and we'll bring it back when we do.
Okay, so just thirdly, I like what you're doing with the staff position, trying to have the balance of it connecting with small businesses and BIA, so I look forward to seeing more details on that in the future. And finally, I'd be happy to support this recommendation to move this work forward. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hazlett-Thiel.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor McNeese. Great presentation as well as good detail. I also want to say a tremendous thank you for some of the flexibility that was demonstrated. We had some generous spacing that occurred in downtown through COVID, and there was a bit of a push and pull in the downtown corridor trying to make sure there was opportunity for all to participate. And I appreciated the emotional empathy that was expressed to the restaurants and the help to kind of get to a better spot. I am curious about the option of going to a 2 or a 3-year possible permit rather than constantly redoing this every year. So will that come back to us with your recommendation in terms of an analysis of the pros and cons of that?
Through you, Councillor O'Meara. So that is something that we looked at, and and because it was feedback we also received through the survey, but what we decided in looking at it was, especially on our main streets, the number of restaurants that change year over year, it was difficult to give someone, say, a 3-year permit if in some cases we've had restaurants who use 1.5 spaces. And so it's a little bit difficult to guarantee someone 5 years when we don't know if a retail might change to a restaurant the next year. So at this point, we've decided not to look at multi-year, and it's part of why we want to change the application process so that we can sort of look at those blocks as a whole at one time and make sure that we're being fair in what restaurants get. But we can do more of an analysis if that's requested.
No, that explanation helps me. Balanced and equitable needs to be our frame of reference as we kind of move forward, because it is an important part of the vibrancy of downtown. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick questions, and thank you very much for the report. It's very detailed, and I think it's going to bring clarity to all the merchants, especially on Kerr Street and Lakeshore. The challenge I think we're going to have in the future, Rebecca, and just to make a footnote of it, that with development of Kerr Street and Lakeshore resurfacing or work being done on beautification, will have impact on those patios. So we need to have some kind of plan or mitigation plan with respect to how we're going to deal with that in the future with respect to permitting and costs and so forth. I'm also very thankful that you've kept the insurance down to $2 million rather than bumping up to $5 million. That put a lot of pressure on our merchants. So this report and moving forward and having one person contact is going to relieve a lot of frustration with the BIA, especially on Kerr Street with respect to getting information in a timely fashion. So again, thanks very much.
Through you, Councillor Mayor, I just wanted to say part of that FTE will be to provide clarity in those situations you're talking about, Councillor Chisholm. So if there's resurfacing in that, it's having that point of contact for the businesses in that BIA to know where to go so that we can be flexible and work with them and see what's coming. You know, so it's not always reactive. We can pre-plan, and that's the purpose of having this person who's sort of more dedicated to small business and Main Street work.
I'm very, just another, just kind of hit too, is with respect to, I saw the accessibility, but it was very vague on how you're approaching that. With the AODA, with respect to patios, I hope we're having discussions with those representatives and how we can have access, good access and clear access for patios for people in wheelchairs or, you know, they have challenges. So just keep that in mind too, because I knew we had a challenge with one merchant and how we're going to deal with that, because it has impact in how the design of the patio. So just to keep that in mind too.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if the committee doesn't mind, I just have two quick questions as well, just on the barriers. Can we please ensure they're not those neon orange ones or the big concrete ones? I think we had a lot of concerns about when those got delivered. I don't think some of the restaurants were too happy with them, but if we can maybe get an Oakville option for what that looks like, that would be great.
Absolutely. That through you, Councillor, that is part of what we're looking at.
Fantastic.
Is sort of that Oakville specific
okay.
design.
My second question, just it has to do with the fees. So no matter what, businesses aren't going to say, oh, it's so great, they're only giving me 30% of what it costs. They're just going to see it as a fee. Mm-hmm. But then I also was thinking, they're also not going to be so happy when every year they're just handing the same application in, and it should just be a stamp and play by and large. Have we looked at a tiered permitting fee where if you're a first-time applicant, you've got to pay because we've got to go and do our due diligence, we've got to make sure they are, but then as you renew, and we've got it on file, if it's the same as it always was, it would seem to me that there would be a willingness, and maybe it would be perceived as better if we say, okay, first year you apply, it's the 50%, $690. The second year you apply, it's $414, and that seems a little easier because I would hope it's not the same amount of work. I know we have to inspect, but if we've already got the drawings, fire's already looked at it, building's already said this is okay, it should be less of an onerous job on staff to do it year after year. And I think that would bring some goodwill to the businesses if they saw that, hey, I do this every year, but it got cheaper after the first year and I get it. So maybe we can look at a tiered fee structure for that first year when we've got to do more due diligence if you're just new applying. But then after that, if we're making them go yearly, it would be, I think it'd be some goodwill to just sort of say, okay, it's a reduced fee, but it's a little easier for us. So maybe we can look at that as well.
Through you, Chairman, I feel like that's a very reasonable request. It's something that we can look at, because as you say, if there are no changes, it should take less time to review.
Ideally,
so we can look
let's
at
hope. Thank you very much. So seeing no other questions, the report has been moved by Councillor McNeese. Any objections? Seeing none, that carries. Thank you. So our last discussion item is the confidential discussion item of the security master plan. We do have a presentation on this, and I believe we are going to go into closed session. on that. So what I would need is a mover to move into closed session. Councillor Elgar. So Councillor Elgar has moved that we move into closed session in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act for the purpose of dealing with the matter regarding the security of the municipality and municipal property. All in favor, or, sorry, any objections? Seeing none. So we'll take a couple minutes just to move the chambers into closed session. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm welcoming us back from closed session. So I just like a motion that staff direction given in closed session be approved. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Knoll. Any objections? Seeing none, that carries. So at that point, we are on to adjournment, and I don't think I need a motion for this. Oh, I have a motion. Councillor Haslett-Thiel is moving adjournment. Any objections? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for the time and the work.